Hi everybody, it's Amy and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. Today we are doing a very special video. This is the month of June and it is Pride Month here in the USA, and that is where we are celebrating LGBTQ plus or queer representation in our books as far as the book community goes. And I regularly read books with that kind of representation. So I've kind of accumulated a list. I'm going to kind of break it up into some categories, but this is accumulation of books that I have read and have enjoyed. And I also have a TBR of tentative reads for this month for myself, and will probably continue on throughout the summer. But before we get into it, let me know what you think of my intro. I have been kind of thinking of changing it up, but just let me know what you think in the comments. But this list, it's extensive. I've got a pile right here. This isn't even everything. This is just what I have physical copies of. But that being said, because there's so many books, I'm just going to briefly kind of go through it, tell you what kind of representation is in it. And I've broken this up into kind of two different lists. So I have feel-good books where it is a more like happy, positive message, even if it might have some emotional things in it. It might be a little bit more cozy or more upbeat, because I know some people would much rather have representation in their books where there isn't just violence against the queer community and things like that. And I totally understand that. So I have that list. And then I have what I'm calling my emotionally intense list. And this is either because of just heavy topics with like high fantasy that has representation, but there's like violence and just heavier themes. There might be politics, things like that. Or there might be specific like prejudice and violence against members of the queer community. So I just wanted to kind of break that up. That way there is something for everybody, and it's really about what you're okay with reading. And of course, like I said, I have my TBR, and I actually just finished a book right before filming this that I really enjoyed and I'm excited to talk about. But let's get into this list. I am very much looking forward to it because these are books that I have really enjoyed. First up on my list is actually an ongoing series that is like a cozy fantasy series, and that is The Cerulean Chronicles, as it is now called, by T.J. Klune. It starts with the house in the Cerulean Sea and then goes to somewhere beyond the sea. And I need to get the hardcover of this one. But this is such a sweet story, and we are following a social worker named Linus who lives in a world with magical creatures, and they are kind of regulated, and so he is assigned to go check out this mysterious orphanage that houses magical creature children. And it is just so sweet, so heartfelt, and we have a kind of subplot of romance that features a male and male gay relationship, and it's just very sweet. This is just perfect for like a heartwarming story that has really great messages. Next up is a literary fiction book that I recently finished, and that is The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle by Matt Cain. I really enjoyed this book. It was very heartwarming. It does have some more intense moments in it, but I still feel like it is a really great and positive message and kind of happy, feel-good vibes to it. And this is about an elderly British male postal worker who is kind of being forced into retirement, and he decides he wants to reclaim his identity and his life, and he goes on this search for this lost love from his childhood. And it's about kind of coming out as an elderly person, as gay, and it is just such a heartfelt story. It's about the friends that he makes and just reclaiming his identity, coming out of his shell, and it's just a really beautiful and positive story, and I love that it featured an older main character. Homegrown Magic is a cozy romantasy that features a story about two childhood friends who were estranged and then are thrown back together, and they're trying to rekindle their friendship and relationship, but their responsibilities in life are trying to pull them apart. And this just has a really sweet romance. There is spice in it, so just be aware of that, but I really enjoyed the chemistry and just the bond that they had. And this is featuring a non-binary character, so So we have a really sweet queer relationship with a non-binary character and a female main character. My next story is one that is a little bit different, but it is so much fun, and that is River of Teeth by Sarah Gailey. This is a historical fantasy with maybe a little bit of sci-fi vibes, but it is a novella that features a story where it's like an alternate history of America where hippos have run rampant in the country, and we've got hippo wranglers, we've got a heist, we've got a story of vengeance. It is just a wild kind of romp of a story, but it is so much fun. But we have a full like cast of characters, of queer characters. We have non-binary and we have bisexual characters, but this one is just absolutely hilarious, and I highly recommend it for a quick read, but a really fun time. Next up is another cozy fantasy series, and this is pretty much the quintessential cozy fantasy. You probably already know what I'm going to say, but that is the Legends and Lattes series by Travis Baldree. First is Legends and Lattes, of course, and then Bookshops and Bone Dust. And I believe we're getting the third book in November, and that is Brigands and Bread Knives. I'm really excited to read that. But this is, again, a cozy fantasy that's very low stakes about an orc who retires from her kind of arms for hire career, and she wants to open up a coffee shop. And it just has great found family, and it has a sapphic romance subplot that is very sweet. Kind of in the same vein of Legends and Lattes, Cursed Cocktails by S.O. Rowland is a wonderful, cozy little fantasy. It is featuring a warrior who is retiring, and he wants to open up a tavern and serve magical cocktails. It is very heartwarming, and it features a gay romance. It is this really sweet kind of slice of life, and it just has this warm vibe of like a pub, old school tavern, and it also has great found family as well. Next is another novella that is very much sci-fi, kind of cozy sci-fi, and that is A Psalm for the Wild, built by Becky Chambers. This is a series or a duology. I have not read the second book, but now I believe you can actually get both books in one volume, which I think is really cool. But this is about a monk and a robot who journey together and kind of discuss life, and it's a very reflective story. It's a very thought-provoking story, but in a very like cozy vibe. And this features a non-binary character, and the world itself is queer normative, where queer people and identity is very much normal and accepted. Now, I said that all the feel-good books aren't necessarily cozy, and this next one is one of them, but it is just a feel-good fun time, and that is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty, or S.A. Chakraborty. This is probably one of my favorite writers, if not my favorite, next to like Robin Hobb. But this is such a fun pirate fantasy, and we are following a middle-aged mom who is a former pirate but is drawn back into the pirate life for one last heist. It is such a feel-good fun time. There are intense kind of action moments, but nothing really crazy. But we have a lot of queer side characters and a trans man in this story. I think a really great place to find feel-good kind of cozy queer representation is actually in graphic novels. So these next three are going to be in that category. And first up is Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Zhu. This is a really charming YA graphic novel with fantasy vibes. We have a witch and we have a non-binary werewolf. And we are kind of rekindling a lost relationship while also confronting a magical threat. But this features a really sweet queer romance, and it's just a really good time. This next one is so adorable. It is The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. This is about a prince who secretly likes to wear dresses, and about the dressmaker who kind of helps him discover himself and express himself. This is a really sweet story, and we are kind of seeing like identity exploration, and it's all done with a really sweet queer romance. Next up is actually a graphic novel series, and probably some of my favorite graphic novels, and that is the Tea Dragon series by Kay O'Neill. This is the first book, the only one that I have, the Tea Dragon Society, and this is such a whimsical and sweet world that is beautifully illustrated about a group of people who are kind of raising these tea dragons who literally magically produce tea from their bodies. It is so cozy and sweet. We have a lot of queer characters, including non-binary characters, and kind of queer romance subplots. It's just about acceptance and love. It's very heartwarming. I just love the messages in these stories. Okay, so that is all of my feel-good recommendations. Next up, we're going to get into some more emotionally intense recommendations. So these are ones that are just gripping. They may be difficult reads at times, but they are very powerful and ones that I enjoyed reading or just felt like they were very important stories that were moving to me. And first up is actually a more recent read, and that is Black Salt Queen by Samantha Bansil. This is set in a Southeast Asian inspired world, and we have these powerful, noble women who are vying for the throne. We've got secrets, we've got betrayal, we've got crazy family dynamics, we've got toxic relationships. It is all of the drama. But by the end of it, it was just such a moving and powerful story. And this is an ongoing series, but I really enjoyed this. This definitely is featuring a sapphic romance, and we definitely have some toxic relationships in here, so just be aware of that. And I do want to list the trigger warnings with the books on this more emotionally intense list. So this has violence, misogyny, classism, manipulation, and death. So just be aware of those things. Next up is actually a book that I finished yesterday, so it is quite fresh for me, and I am still recovering. But wow, was it an incredibly written book. And that is Crueler Mercies by Marin Chase. This is a very haunting and emotional kind of historical fantasy that features a princess that kind of has like Rapunzel vibes, but it is very much its own story. And she is navigating trauma and abuse and vengeance. And it features a really tender sapphic romance as well. But this is definitely an intense story, and I really love just how like raw it was. I really enjoyed the writing. So as far as trigger warnings, we have abuse, emotional and physical, misogyny, trauma, war, and violence. Next up is a fantasy trilogy that I have read the first two books, and I am determined to finish it. I'm going to read this third book. I've been trying all year to finish it, but I just keep putting it off with arcs and different things that I plan to read. But this is the Rook and Rose trilogy by M.A. Carrick. They are a writing duo. And this I kind of interchange from like Rook and Rose to calling it the Mask of Mirrors trilogy. I've read the first two books, The Mask of Mirrors and Liar's Knot, but I need to read Labyrinth's Heart. But I'm not going to hold up all three books, so I'll just hold up the first one. But this is a very complex and intricate fantasy. We've got a lot of politics. We've got a vast cast of characters. We've got masked identities, a very complex magic system, kind of dual magic system that doesn't fully make sense. It's not supposed to. So if you're okay with some like ambiguity, this is going to be the fantasy series for you. But this is featuring a like queer normative world. We have a lot of different queer characters, including some like sapphic romance, gay romance, polyamorous characters. There's a lot going on in here. And for the trigger warnings, we've got a few. Violence, manipulation, trauma, political corruption, and threats of torture. So, and we also have like a weird magical cult. So just be aware of that. But this is actually a really fantastic series. It is just so complex and it's so immersive. It's like a Venetian-inspired world. So if that piques your interest, I would definitely get into this. Like, I love these covers. They're kind of creepy, but very pretty and intricate. If you want something different, something very complex to kind of sink your teeth into, I'll get it out eventually. This is definitely going to be the fantasy series for you. Next up is a book that I enjoyed. It is the first of a series. I don't think I'm going to continue the series. I'm just personally not a paranormal romance person, but I do think that this was well written, and it is by TJ Klune, who I love. And this is Wolf Song, the first book of the Green Creek series. So this is a very emotional, paranormal romance featuring werewolves. And this is definitely featuring a gay romance between two young men. And it's very much about like self acceptance and overcoming kind of your own insecurities. There's definitely grief in here. There's a lot of emotional intensity, hence it being on the emotionally intense list. But I really enjoyed a lot of aspects of it. I just wasn't really into like the kind of like melodrama of the paranormal romance. But that is just a personal thing. But I do feel like it is really well written and other people would probably really enjoy this. And as far as trigger warnings, we have emotional abuse, homophobia, death, trauma, and violence. But if you like the idea of like a found family of like a werewolf pack in like a small town in, I believe it's in Oregon is where it takes place, then you might enjoy this. All right, we are getting to the good stuff. This is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, fantasy series, and that is the Daevabad trilogy, starting with The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. And this, again, is the same author of The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. I'm just holding the first book because I didn't want bald spots on my shelf because I took so many books down. But this is just a really rich fantasy series that is Middle Eastern inspired. We have jinn, we have complex magic systems, we have such intricate politics, we have kind of like warring religious factions. There's a lot going on in here, but oh my gosh, it is so amazing. And we do have queer characters. We have a more featured, like, gay romance in here. And it is just the romance that is in this book, like there's different romance subplots, is just so good. Um, don't expect everything to be like happy and feel good necessarily. This is on the emotionally intense list, but wow, is it good? But I absolutely love this series. It is definitely not just 5-star series, but 6 stars across the board. I love it so much. But let's get into the trigger warnings. We have violence, we have slavery, we have genocide, racism, torture, and religious discrimination. So, this is a little bit intense at times, but so worth it. And now for something completely different. I actually have a play for you, a play script, but that is The Laramie Project by Moises Kaufman. I actually read this in college for a theater class. This is actually based off of a real life event about the murder of a gay college student named Matthew Shepard. It took place in, I believe it's Laramie, Wisconsin. The town was called Laramie. But this is about the hate crimes committed against him and his eventual murder. So this is a more intense read, but it is a very powerful read, it is a very eye-opening read. It definitely is talking about violence against the queer community, but I feel like this is just a really important read if you are able to read this kind of content. And as far as the trigger warnings, we do have hate crimes, homophobia, murder, slurs, and of course, emotional trauma. But this is a really short read, and it's very much like interviews, like documentary style. So it's a very interesting kind of format in order to tell this story, but just a really powerful read. Getting into a bit more kind of like literary fiction, I recently read My Friends by Frederick Bachman. This is his latest release from May of 2025. And this is featuring a teenage girl who is very drawn to this painting featuring 4 friends. And she kind of is slowly learning the story of the friendships behind this painting. These 4 teenagers from like 20, 25 years ago. And it is an emotional story. It is very much like a found family, strong friendships kind of story, but it definitely is emotionally intense. But this is featuring gay male main characters. This is very much like a coming of age kind of story. And it is like a dual timeline. We're kind of in the present with our female main character, and then we are getting like a look into the past and flashbacks of these 4 friends. So the trigger warnings for this, it's featuring domestic violence, substance abuse, emotional abuse, homophobia, grief, and suicidal ideation. So just be aware of those things going into it. But if you haven't read a Frederick Bachman book, you absolutely need to. I read his book Beartown. This is my second book of his, and his writing is just absolutely amazing. I feel like every other line is something quotable and just relevant to life. Absolutely a fantastic writing. My next book is one that is a bit different. It is actually kind of on the internet being labeled like weird girl fiction. Uh, so if like kind of dark humor is something that would maybe appeal to you, and the idea of weird girl books sounds up your alley, this might be for you, but this is definitely not going to be for everybody. So this is kind of how I have it described: a darkly funny, poignant, and raw novel about a pregnant teen, she's 18, navigating obsession, grief, and identity. She's bisexual, kind of exploring her identity, and it definitely has emotional themes. Like, it's very much like emotionally detached. It's very much like you are in her raw thoughts all the time, and it is definitely funny at times, but sometimes intense and very uncomfortable. So just be aware of that. But it is about her kind of becoming obsessed with a customer at the pizza shop that she works at, and it just kind of unravels. And it is definitely an emotional journey, and it it is very poignant. I have the word poignant in here, but uh, it takes you on this journey that really has some powerful messages, but it's just in this really kind of bizarre package. Next on my list is actually another sci-fi novella. I'm surprised how many I have on this list because I'm not a huge sci-fi person, but there is just really good representation within this genre. And it is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. So this is a very kind of strange, very lyrical and poetic kind of sci-fi. It is two warriors who are on opposite sides of this literal time war, and throughout time they are sending each other letters, and over time they end up falling in love. It is a bit complicated. It doesn't quite make sense at the beginning, but the more you go and kind of just get into the vibe of the story, the more it makes sense. But it is a bit strange and ambiguous, but it has some really beautiful and poetic writing. So this is featuring a sapphic romance, and it is definitely sad, but really moving at the same time. And it wasn't one that I particularly loved, but I really did appreciate the writing and enjoyed it. But I know that there are others that absolutely rave about this, and I would definitely recommend it if you like the idea of like really lyrical and poetic writing and kind of this sci-fi like time war setting. All right, let's get back into some fantasy. That is my bread and butter. And the next couple are actually YA fantasy, and these are ones that I really, really enjoy. And first is The Legendborn Cycle by Tracy Deonn. This is a really powerful series. It is an ongoing series. There are 3 books out. I don't know how many there's actually going to be, if it's going to be 4 or 5 books in the series, but this is an Arthurian legend kind of based story about a Black teen girl who goes to a special program at the University of North Carolina for teenagers, and she comes across some really strange happenings and magic and is pulled into this world of secret societies that are kind of like Arthurian based. So in this we have a few queer characters, including sapphic, gay, and non-binary rep. So there's a pretty vast cast of characters, and it grows as the series goes along. I really like the representation in this book, and it also is dealing with racism, very much like the prominent kind of theme in this series. So as far as trigger warnings, of course, racism, generational trauma, grief, loss of a parent, PTSD, slavery, and violence. And I would say like systemic oppression as well. But this is just such a fantastic series, and it just has great diversity and representation across the board. Next up is a duology that is probably some of my favorite YA fantasy writing, and that is the Ray Bear duology by Jordan Ifugo. This is a West African inspired fantasy that has incredible world building, really interesting magic. It is featuring kind of like a council of nobles that serve an emperor kind of figure, but we are featuring a young female character who is raised by this like chaotic goddess, basically to be an assassin. So we have a number of queer characters, including asexual representation, which I feel like you don't see very often in books, but I felt like it was done really well here. And this is definitely featuring like found family with just a lot of like acceptance and love. And if that sounds up your alley, I would definitely recommend this, but there are definitely trigger warnings with this. We have child abuse, manipulation, parental abandonment, violence, and death. But this is just such a fantastic fantasy duology. It has some of the most incredible YA fantasy writing. Last on my list is a really fun fantasy trilogy, and that is the Shades of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. This series is really fun and exciting. It kind of has like a multiverse setting. Uh, we have like multiple versions of London, England, and it has a vast cast of characters. There is a prominent like gay romance with some of the side characters, but it is very much like a feature. And I just really enjoy this fantasy series. If you kind of like pirate vibes, there's some of that in like the second and third books. This just has a really great like queer romance in it. And of course, we have our trigger warnings. There is violence, war, blood, trauma, and dark magic. But just a really fun time and a really like easy, almost kind of introductory, like adult fantasy. All right, those are my recommendations. Let's move on to my potential TBR. I know, like, in previous months in this year, I was like, I'm not going to do a TBR, but I do have like tentative books, like kind of like hopefuls for the month. And these are some of the queer representation books that I hope to get to. First up is a book that I actually just finished before filming, and that is A Clash of Steel by C.B. Lee. This is a YA retelling of Treasure Island, the beloved story, but this is set in 19th century China. So it's featuring two girls who are trying to find this lost buried treasure, and it's very much like high seas pirate adventure vibes. And it is featuring a sapphic romance that's really sweet and tender. It very much feels like discovering identity. It has very like coming of age vibes. And I think one of the coolest parts is the story was featuring a character based on a real life pirate, a pirate queen who was known as like the most successful pirate to ever live. Her name is Zhang Yisao, and she was like the most famous like Chinese pirate queen, which I thought was super cool. I mentioned earlier, of course, I really want to get to Labyrinth's Heart. I have been trying to finish this series, y'all, and I really love it. I just have had so many arcs that I just keep putting it off because it is a bit of a beefy book. Next up is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, and it is a book about a trans boy who summons a ghost to prove himself to his traditional Latinx family, but falls for the spirit he raises. That sounds very intriguing and like a fun time. So we have a trans male protagonist and a male and male romance. Another trans representation book, Most Ardently by Gabe Cole Navoa. This is like a queer Pride and Prejudice retelling. I kind of like the idea of like retelling these stories with queer representation. So this is featuring a trans Darcy navigating identity, romance, and Regency era social pressures. So we have our trans male lead and a queer romance. Now, a more modern story, Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane. This is about two ex-best friends and former rivals who are forced on a nostalgic road trip and maybe a second chance at love. So this is lesbian male characters, a sapphic romance, and queer friendships. This next one I have heard many good things about, and it is the first book of a series, and that is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marski. This is a historical fantasy full of magic, mystery, and male romance between a gentleman scholar and a magically inclined bureaucrat. So we have a gay romance, queer found family, and an Edwardian setting with a queer normative lens. That sounds really interesting, kind of going back into history and creating like a queer normative alternate history line. TJ Klune has been on this list a couple of times already, so you could probably guess that he was going to be in my TBR, but I want to read his book, The Bones Beneath My Skin, and this is about a strange child with mysterious powers who appears on the run, drawing a reclusive man into a journey of connection and grief. And this is supposed to be kind of like a mystery thriller sort of story. The queer rep in here is a gay main character, an emotionally grounded queer narrative. This next one sounds really cute. It is In Case of Heartbreak by Courtney Kay. It's about a bakery owner who reconnects with a childhood best friend turned celebrity crush in this cozy small-town queer rom-com. The queer rep in here is a gay main character and queer community. We've got another rom-com, and that is Chef's Choice by TJ Alexander. A fake dating foodie rom-com where a trans man teams up with a non-binary pastry chef for a high-stakes inheritance scheme. That sounds like a chaotic and fun time. But this has a trans man, non-binary MC, and queer found family. Last on my list is a book that has been on my shelf for way too long, and that is Can't Spell Treason Without Tea by Rebecca Thorne. So this is a cozy fantasy about two women who ditch danger and politics to open a tea shop together and fall in love while adventuring and building a quiet life. So this is featuring a sapphic main couple. I think this is like they have a relationship and then it's like them kind of like building a life together. So it's like a already established relationship, which I find interesting. But that is all of the books on my list, guys. We made it. Thank you for getting to this point in the video. I hope that you got some good recommendations or some ideas of things to check out. And definitely let me know if you have read any of these and whether or not you enjoyed them. And definitely let me know your queer book recs, whether it's fantasy, literary fiction, plays, whatever. I want to know about them. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. Leave me, of course, a rainbow emoji in the comments, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!